Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this Thursday night edition of the Full Court Trap Podcast. I am your host, Luke Tackett. Here joined with me is Blake Recruit Zone Smith, my main man, my number one co-host. We talked about the Florida upset over Tennessee this week on our instant reaction pod, as well as Georgia taking down Kentucky, but we got much more to discuss from the week that was, and we got a lot of action going this weekend. Blake Dan Hurley's been running his mouth again. He never fails to provide us with some content, so I'm sure we'll get into that as well. But let's just get straight into it. So first of all, I want to talk about a team that we haven't really given a whole lot of flowers to. In fact, the majority of the talking points with them this year has been kind of trashing them, and it's the Arizona Wildcats. We might be witnessing a revival of Tommy Lloyd's program after the bumpy start to the year. They just went into Morgantown and blew out West Virginia on Tuesday night, 75-56. Blake, Arizona, they're starting to get this thing trending in the right direction after everybody kind of buried them. You got to like what you see here if you're a Wildcats fan.
Yeah, it's definitely good to see, not just for Wildcats fans, but just college basketball fans as a whole. I mean, you got guys like KJ Lewis coming out and putting on a show practically. He put up 21 points on 9 of 13 shooting, had 4 assists, 2 steals. Great night overall. And you got Jaden Bradley showing why he was rated so highly coming out of high school. With him being in his junior year, he had 15 points and 5 assists on the night, while shooting 6 of 10 from the field. So overall, great game by the Wildcats in a rough road environment. They blew them out 75-56, and it's just fun seeing this team get back to being who they are. I mean, they shot over 50% from the field. So I mean, just an amazing performance for them on the night.
Yeah, they left no doubt. And I mean, ever since that UCLA game where they fought in that low scoring, just awful watch as a whole, they've ripped off 5 straight wins now. That includes a win against the Cincinnati team that was ranked. This West Virginia team was obviously ranked pretty highly after the Kansas win. We'll see if that holds when the new polls come out on Monday. But they've got another test against UCF coming this weekend. I think that we probably won't get into that too much, but I imagine Arizona's probably going to take care of business there. I like them in that home spot, but definitely got to be encouraged because, I mean, at the start of the year, obviously, it did not go the way that you wanted it to. If you're a fan of Arizona, I mean, they dropped a few games there that you weren't really thinking they would, and they had a lot of high preseason expectations, but they're starting to get it together. Caleb Love, he's still being a little bit of a shot chucker, though. That's the one problem you're always going to be dealing with him as a core piece of your team. He shot 3 for 10 in this game, but Jaden Bradley, he came in, like you said, and took care of business. KJ Lewis as well. Switching back over to the West Virginia side of things, though, I mean, there's no denying the job that Darian DeVries has done with this squad in year one of a new regime. I mean, they come off that historic win against Kansas at Allen Fieldhouse, the first time they won over there in their program. But were we a little bit too quick to jump on the hype train with this West Virginia squad, or is this just one of those nights if you're a Mountaineers fan?
Probably just one of those nights for West Virginia. Javon Small was really the only guy that gave much effort, I felt like, on the night. He shot pretty badly from the field, 6-17 from the field, 3-9 from 3. But he put up 17 points, 6 boards, and 5 assists. So, I mean, it's still a quality performance for the guy, but besides that, they didn't have a single guy touch double digits on the night. Sincere Harris, he had a really good game still, though. 3 of 4 from the field, 8 points, 3 assists, 3 boards. I mean, in a loss, that's probably not a great performance, but I mean, it's still a quality performance. And then you got Amani Hansberry with 8 points and 3 boards on 50% from the field. So they definitely need to, as a whole, give more production, I would say, and not just let all the pressure be on Javon Small, because at the end of the day, in tough conference play, you're not going to be winning very many games with effort like that.
No, not at all. And I mean, fun little tidbit here. If you recall correctly, In the battle for Atlantis, these two teams actually faced off, and Arizona lost to West Virginia in overtime. So
Yeah.
they kind of got their lick back here in a revenge spot. That's kind of weird. You see two conference opponents meet twice, like not in the scope of conference play. You had them meet in an MTE, and then later on they get that conference game out of the way. I'm not sure if they play again during Big 12 play. I don't think they will, but we'll see about that. And I mean, yeah, I think the story here is Arizona coming out and keeping this thing rolling with 5 straight now, and you got to like the momentum that they're building up there. But moving on from them, Bruce Pearl and the Auburn Tigers, they survived a scare against Texas. I remember on the instant reaction, we were kind of box score watching, just keeping a live update, and we were like, well, Auburn's handling their business. They're up double digits. They look like they're in control. And Texas, they stormed back, and they made this a close one. They had a chance, really, to win the game. Jordan Pope kind of took a contested, not really a great look from three that could have helped swing the momentum more in the Longhorns' favor to try and will them back in down the stretch, but wasn't meant to be. Shout out to Bruce Pearl, though. Clips of him from his debut press conference at Auburn where he said that he wanted to be the most winningest coach in their program have been circling around social media this week. So feel a good story there for them. He's accomplished in everything he's wanted to and more with that Auburn program. And Blake, they're probably, barring a slip up on Saturday against South Carolina, it looks like they're going to be the number one team in the country after Tennessee's stinker on Tuesday.
And I mean, that's really how it should have been from the jump almost. I mean, this team as a whole, one of, if not the deepest squads in all the country. When you got guys like Janai Broom, Chad Baker-Mazara, Miles Kelly, and Denver Jones all putting up double digits, and then, heck, you add in Tahad Pettiford coming off the bench with 10 points. You got 5 guys in double digits against a quality SEC team. Then, I mean, there's just not many teams in the SEC or let alone the entire country that can beat that team.
No, not at all. And I mean, on the Texas side of things, you do have to give them credit for the fight they put up because they could have rolled over and just, got blown out of the water like we saw with Ohio State and other teams that have come across the buzzsaw that is Auburn this year. But Arthur Kaluma had other ideas with a 34-point performance. Hell of a night for him. And then you had Jordan Pope with 19. A little bit of questionable shot selection at the end, but still a decent performance overall. Trey Johnson, more of a quiet night out of him. He's one of the better freshmen in the SEC and around college basketball in general, but didn't hear much from him. Blake, I don't know about you, but I've mentioned it a couple of times now on TikTok, on YouTube, but this Texas team, they've got talent. They haven't really put it all together yet, but I sincerely think that they're going to cause some SEC teams trouble, and I will not be surprised at all if they spring an upset this weekend against Tennessee when the Vols come to town. And even beyond that, I do think that they're going to steal a couple of games in the SEC.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Trey Johnson, he's shown he's a top 10 freshman in the entire country. I mean, and then you got Jordan Pope and Arthur Kaluma. I mean, that core right there, I really think they can make a lot of noise in the SEC this year.
Yeah, for sure. The only thing about Texas that I'm just not super sold on, and I mean, I hate to crush the guy, but Rodney Terry, I'm just not really sold on his coaching style and his coaching ability. I mean, they gave him that job a few years back. I think that all happened originally when the Chris Beard stuff broke out
Yeah.
and all those allegations came out, and he got flung into that role, and he did a good job with what he inherited. But for long-term success, if you're Texas, I'm really not sure if Rodney Terry is going to be the answer, but we'll see how that evolves. I mean, what do you think about Rodney Terry thus far? I mean, his tenure, it's had its moments, and then it's also been kind of mediocre at best, really. And I'm interested to see what you have to think about this because I do think that, maybe they are just a slightly better coach away with this kind of roster from being a more dominant force in the league.
Man, I don't know if I would put a lot of pressure on Terry right now. I mean, it's really early on in his tenure. I mean, if you had let's just go out of the way and say like a Pat Kelsey, a Mark Pope, one of those type of guys that come in and completely rejuvenate a program. I feel like if they had a coach probably like that, they could be better as a team. But I mean, they showed. I mean, with that fight they had with like 4 minutes and 44 seconds, I think it was. It was a 17-point game. Auburn was killing Texas at Texas. And then they come back, make it a 5-point game at the end of the game, which they could have potentially won that in the later seconds of the game, but there's some questionable shots that were put up. And just like how the game is these days, I feel like. But, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not super sold on Rodney Terry. I don't want to destroy the guy because I mean, you can't make a judgment off this game. Auburn's just a great team. They're one of the title favorites, if not the title favorites of all the teams in
Yeah.
America right now. And I mean, in the SEC, they're definitely gonna. I would be very shocked after I saw the way that Tennessee performed this week and Kentucky performed. If Auburn doesn't take it, I do think that Alabama and Florida are going to be some serious threats to what they've got going on. But we've said it all season long. Auburn's the top dog in the SEC. I don't see that changing, but not a whole lot to unpack here. If you're Auburn, you took care of business in a hostile environment over in Texas and got the job done. That's all you can ask for. Bruce Pearl stamps his name into Auburn basketball history, which is always cool to see. He seems like a good guy and a good coach, and I know that I had my eye on him back when Cal left out for Arkansas in the spring. But moving on, Michigan, they played UCLA in a late night Big Ten battle on, I believe it was Tuesday night. And Vlad Golden, man, he went nuclear, Blake. This guy dropped 36 points on UCLA, a team that's got a good big in Tyler Bilodeau, but he wasn't to be found on that given night because Vlad Golden and Danny Wolf, Trey Donaldson, they just took over that game, and it really wasn't ever in doubt for the Wolverines.
Yeah, I mean, the Twin Towers for Michigan, some of the best bigs or big pair in all the country. I mean, Golden, 36 points on 13-18 from the field, 7 boards, 2 assists, and a block on the night. Unbelievable performance. And then you got Danny Wolf on a somewhat quiet night, 12 points, 8 boards, 6 assists, 1 steal, 1 block. I mean, he did have 7 turnovers. That's scary. But besides that, great game by those two. And then you got Trey Donaldson as well. 20 points on the night on super efficient shooting, 7 of 11. And then you got Namari Burnett, 17 points on 5 of 6 from the field with 3 made threes. Like that Michigan team definitely can make some noise in the Big Ten, especially when you're beating UCLA by 19 at UCLA and causing their coach to have a freaking heart attack dang near.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you mentioned Michigan making some noise in the Big Ten. I've been thinking about it recently. There's a kind of 4 teams at the top of the Big Ten right now that I have my eye on the most, and that would be Michigan, Michigan State, Illinois, and then Oregon. Of that group of teams, Blake, which do you think is the best in the Big Ten? And you can't forget about Indiana either. I mean, I know they had a rocky start to the year, but they've started to string some games together as well. They're currently sitting at 3rd in the conference overall, with Michigan currently at 1st. But of the teams at the top of that conference, those are the ones I have my eye on. And I kind of, right now, lean towards Michigan being the best of the group because they have been putting together impressive performances and don't have a whole lot of bad losses on that resume either.
I wanted to say Oregon, but they're losing to Ohio State right now. So I might have to go with, this might be a somewhat hot take, but I might have to go with Illinois right now. I mean, Jacku is literally one of the best freshmen in the league. He's just unbelievable. Not sure many people thought that was going to happen when they got him from overseas, but I mean, he's outperforming some of the top freshmen in all the country right now. So I definitely think Illinois is probably the team to beat in the Big Ten. But I mean, then again, you can't count out Michigan or Oregon, and let alone Michigan State as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, you can never count out Izzo because, I mean, he always finds a way to, at the end of the year, no matter how underwhelming they are, he finds a way to sneak into the NCAA tournament, and he always
Yeah.
finds a way to have a team that's going to at least produce and be a competent team. But on the UCLA side of things, I'm currently looking at my phone trying to find like one of the funnier graphics I saw this week. It was a Mick Cronin quote, but I'm looking at it right now. He said it was really hard to coach a group of guys who are delusional. Do we have some turmoil brewing over there in UCLA? Because I mean that's a very, very bold statement to make if you're a head coach after a tough conference loss. And I mean, you think he'd want to rally the guys and kind of pick them up after that, but no, coming out and calling your squad delusional, man, that's a flaming hot take there, Blake. What do you think about that?
Uh, Honestly, when I first heard it, I had like some mixed reactions, but that at the end of the day, I don't think it's far fetched to call out your players like that. It might seem like an asshole move, but I mean, these guys are getting paid millions of dollars now. It's not like how it used to be in college basketball, where guys were going to school and just playing basketball for free, basically. Now guys are getting paid hundreds of thousands, up to millions of dollars just to play for potentially a year or two, maybe 4 or 5 if they're lucky enough. But I mean, yeah, I don't think it's far fetched to say that that quote really isn't a bad thing. I mean, they're practically workers now. So, I mean, in real life, when you're working for somebody, you're getting critiqued like all the time. So, I mean, it's just, to put it bluntly, that's just how the world is. I mean,
Yep.
it makes sense to say something like that.
That is a good way to look at it now because college basketball, I mean, with NIL coming into play, you really are. It's like just kind of a step down from the pros. It's almost sort of like, an internship for the NBA. Like, just, guys are getting paid and you have to run an organization now. You got to distribute NIL. You got to bring in the right guys that fit. You got to cater to people's needs. And I mean, when they're not living up to it, you see Mick Cronin, he's not going to be afraid to let it fly. And I mean, I think if there's anybody that deserves the blunt of the criticism there, you got to look for UCLA. It's Sky Clark. I mean, he did not show up against Michigan that night at all. Dylan Andrews, he was really a no-show as well. Tyler Bilodeau, he had 17 points and 5 boards, but I mean, he just got outclassed by Vlad Golden and Danny Wolf. But when we're looking at UCLA here, they have an 11-4 record overall. They have the win against Gonzaga. They have the loss to North Carolina as of recently. I'm not really sure what to make of this team. This is one of the more confusing teams for me to try and get a overall grip on and see what they're capable of. What do you think about that, Blake? What's kind of like the outlook for this team as we head into Big Ten play and it continues to play out here?
Almost just seems like a Kentucky vibe of a team. I mean, some nights are going to come out on fire, and other nights are just going to come out flat and give in to the opposite team. I mean, getting blown out to Michigan, not a bad loss, but I see both sides. Bad loss in the terms of getting blown out, but I mean, losing to Michigan isn't bad. At Nebraska, not really a bad loss. They're a good team this year. Uh, Who else did they lose to? Oh, at home versus North Carolina. Or no, not at home. I meant
Madison
neutral
Square
site,
Garden,
Madison
yeah.
Square Garden. Yeah, I mean, looking at it now, that's probably a bad loss. So I mean, this team, they're really just going to be up and down, probably all the rest of the way. Maybe Mick Cronin calling his players soft lights a fire under them. I mean, guys like Tyler Bilodeau, Kobe Johnson, Eric Daly, they've all been really quality players for them this year. But maybe we see them turn a corner here. Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention Sebastian Mack as a quality player. But maybe they turn a corner here and actually get off this 2-game losing streak. And it's not going to get any easier from here. I mean, they play at Maryland tomorrow night. In Maryland, as we've seen all year, really good team. They got Julian Reese and Derek Queen, both who are really good bigs. I mean, it is not going to get easier at all. So, Mick Cronin, better get those guys rallied up. I mean, calling them soft in the public eye, I mean, that could light a fire on them, but maybe talking in the locker room can help them out
Yeah, and I
a
mean
little more.
when I think about the Big Ten as a whole, I mean we mentioned who we think's the best right now. Michigan obviously has the head-to-head win against them right now, so you're gonna put them over them. I like Michigan State more as a whole. I definitely like Illinois more as a whole. And then I think, between Purdue, Oregon, and then UCLA, they're kind of fighting for that fourth spot. And it really, I mean, you could pick either one of them out of a hat and throw them into that fourth spot because I think it could turn out either way between that group, and we'll see how it continues to evolve. But Mick Cronin, hopefully your comments there worked. I think it's a little bit bold to come out there and call your squad delusional, but hey, whatever works. And moving on back to the ACC, not really a whole lot to unpack here as far as the game's concerned, but Duke, they laid the hammer on Pittsburgh at Cameron Indoor. Cooper Flagg quite literally laid the hammer on Pittsburgh with that poster dunk that went absolutely viral on the social media waves back on Tuesday night. They now, Blake, fun fact, Duke is the number one team on KenPom.
I
The
did
most
see about
recent,
that.
yeah, the most recent update. They are now number one. So, what do we think? I mean, this Duke squad, they're playing as good as anybody in the country right now. And against Pitt, you saw all of their guys in the starting five hit double figures. Cooper Flagg, I mean, we know what he is. He's elite. He's going to perform night in, night out. Con Knipple had a great outing with 17. I'm not so certain as to say they are the best team in the country right now because I do think that title belongs to Auburn, as we've always said. But do we think this Duke team could pose a genuine challenge to Auburn's number one ranking? I mean, they have the win against Auburn head to head, so I definitely think that it's feasible, especially when Auburn's going to be playing in a brutal SEC while Duke's kind of in a weaker ACC conference.
Yeah, I definitely right now would put Auburn 1A, Duke 1B. I mean, that's just how far or how close to being as good as Auburn they are right now. I mean, they did beat Auburn at Duke, but I mean, this team, I think they actually can go undefeated the rest of the way and end up with only 2 losses on the season. I don't think that's far-fetched at all to say. I think the only game that I could see maybe being a loss. Maybe not, though. The Illinois game in February, late February, if this Illinois team keeps improving and playing like they have as of recent, then I think that game could be one they drop. But besides that and ACC play, I don't think there's really any games. Maybe Clemson or North Carolina, I guess, could sneak one. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this Duke team is they're really too good, I think. I mean, they got, what is it, like 5 or 6 guys that are projected to be drafted right now next year. They got like Sion James, Cooper Flagg, obviously, number 1 pick. Con Knepple they had at like 7. They had Kaman Maluach at 11. And then Tyrese Proctor, I think, 41. Like that team is just super stacked. Like I said earlier
Yeah.
about Auburn or Alabama being one of the most stacked teams in the country, I'm gonna steal this from Rothstein because he's the one that said it earlier. I think it was earlier today or yesterday. He said the 3 deepest teams in the country are Auburn, Alabama, Duke. And to be honest with you, I don't disagree at all with that. I mean, all 3 of those teams are insanely stacked top to bottom, and they're going to make so much noise this season, especially in March.
Yeah, I really don't envision anything slowing down this Duke freight train besides, I mean, you obviously don't want to see any injuries, but that is something that you have to avoid over the course of the season. If this team stays healthy, I mean, I'm like you. I really only see 1 or 2 losses as they head into the ACC. And I mean, that Illinois game in February, that's such a random game. Just throwing
I
that like
know.
last week of February, they got Illinois, who's not even a conference opponent, but I could see them potentially dropping that. I don't think they will, but I think that could be. And I do think that they drop one game against North Carolina because they're going to play them twice. And with how back and forth that rivalry is and how it's always an emotional series, and it seems like those two teams never fail to deliver epic performances, I just think that you're kind of bound to split one in that series. But maybe I'm wrong because UNC has their holes. And the front court of North Carolina, as we mentioned, it's bad, whereas Duke's front court is it's solid. It's nothing crazy good. I mean, Kama Malawach, he's a great talent. He can be a little bit raw at times, and you can see that he's a freshman trying to piece it together. But their front court, obviously, it will triumph against UNC's anytime. But yeah, 1 to 2 losses. I think that's definitely in the cards there for the Duke Blue Devils. And if you're John Shire, you got to be happy with what you're seeing.
And then, like we were talking about in that Illinois game, how we think they could drop that. I mean, they're 0-2 right now in the season on neutral site courts. They lost to Kansas, they lost to Duke, or they lost to Kentucky. Maybe they changed the narrative here, but I mean, I do think that Illinois could potentially sneak this game and win it, but I guess we'll have to see. I mean, this Duke team has shown no signs of stopping their freight train, so.
Yeah, no, not at all. And I mean, I guess since we've brought up the topic of Auburn and Duke, take your pick of one of the two right now that you have to buy stock in the rest of the season and heading into March. You taking either Auburn or Duke, because it really does seem like these are the two best teams in the country right now, at least in my opinion.
Probably go with Auburn. Just the simple fact they have Janai Broome and Tahad Petterford coming off the bench. And they got some of the toughest shot makers in all the country, and Chad Baker-Mazara and Miles Kelly. I mean, that team, probably the most stacked team in America right now. I'm just gonna have to put my stock in with Auburn.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to play devil's advocate here. If I have to pick one the rest of the way, I think I got to go with Duke just because. I mean, you have the best freshman in the country. It's kind of undisputed at this point with Cooper Flagg. You've got a good cast of veterans around him. You know, Tyrese Proctor, he's the stabilizing force for them. He kind of leads the way and it helps the freshmen kind of find their groove. And then you got quality players like Zion James and Knipple's another great freshman talent. Isaiah Evans can be a spark off the bench when he's playing at his best. I mean, if you're Duke, I mean, what can you even really look to improve on at this point? Because this is a team that's just firing on all cylinders right now. It doesn't really seem like there's a notable hole for them.
Yeah, I really can't think of a huge margin of error right now. Not off the top of my head, at least.
Yeah, no, it's definitely hard to kind of find something to pick at with this Duke squad right now. But we're going to be talking about Duke plenty as we move forward. They're going to keep making headlines because that's a star-studded team, and they're going to run through the ACC, in my opinion. But moving on, Uconn, they fell to Villanova. Alex Caravan had 2 free throw misses down the stretch, which ultimately sealed their fate. Really uncharacteristic from a guy like him. You really are shocked to see that, and it's obviously made headlines. But Blake, Villanova got one here, and they're starting to find a little bit of a groove, dare I say. And is Kyle Neptune, I mean, obviously this result's big for him. Is he starting to kind of salvage his image there and save his job in ways? Because he was a very, in the beginning of the season and the non-conference play, his seat was kind of scorching hot. But he started to piece together some results here. I mean, he's got the win against Butler. They obviously blew out DePaul, and now they take out Uconn. So they got 3 straight here. They're starting to find a little bit of a groove and riding the shoulders of Eric Dixon. So what do we think about the Wildcats here?
Yeah, they're definitely improving as a team. Neptune, definitely, his seat has cooled off. It's not as hot anymore. But I think Eric Dixon is one of the best players in the country as well right now. I mean, he struggled from the field, but, I mean, 25.7 points a game. The dude's just going off this year.
Yeah, no, and this game was really a good basketball game as we got down the stretch. There were big time shots being made, solo ball. He continues to be a good shot maker for them. You got quality minutes out of Hassan Diarra. Jalen Stewart came in and had 14 in the absence of Liam McNeely. And Blake, I think that Liam McNeely loss is actually hurting UConn a lot more than people gave it credit for, because I feel like that kind of just got, swept under the rug. Like, oh, it's Dan Hurley, it's UConn. They're going to be okay if they lose McNeely even for a little bit. But with the way that he kind of has outperformed expectations as a freshman this far, I think they definitely kind of need him back because he provides another scoring option and a force from deep as well.
Yeah, I mean, when you got him taken out of the equation, it puts a lot on the shoulders of guys like Solo Ball and Caravan. So, I mean, when you have those two guys taking the most shots and you don't have a shot maker like Liam McNeely in the lineup, and the guy that's shown he can play defense somewhat well so far this season, but definitely him missing out on the season or missing out some games right now is going to hurt that team a lot.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, we've talked about it all year. Aiden Mahaney, he hasn't lived up to any expectations. There's a lot of pressure on that backcourt that Hurley's got there of Solo Ball and Diarra. And that was kind of the story of this game as well, because the bench really provided you with nothing. You really had to lean on your guys in the starting five. And Caravan, like we said, he missed those free throws down the stretch, and that sparked another headline-worthy quote from our boy Dan Hurley. He said, "When Caravan feels sad tonight, he can just do what I did after Maui. Pull out your box of rings and play with your back-to-back national championship rings and get ready for Georgetown." So clearly Dan Hurley's not fazed by his players' struggles there. Blake, obviously we know Dan Hurley is a man that lives in the headlines, and it's a rarity that we ever go, I mean, a week without hearing something from him. Obviously, he had some things to say following this one. He didn't like the criticism that his star player was under there.
It had Twitter. That quote had a lot of people on Twitter up in a frenzy, but I don't see anything wrong with what was said. He just motivating his guy who, let's say, lost them the game. I mean, that I feel like if he hit those two free throws there at the end with how hot they were playing towards the end of the game, they very well would have went off and won that game probably in OT. They had all the momentum there for a while. And then, I mean, Caravan missing those two free throws just hurt them big time, lost them the game practically. So, I mean, he's just motivating his guy, trying to remind him who he is as a player. I mean, these guys go through a lot on and off the court with all the pressure from the media, fans, like just narratives being thrown at them by the media, stuff like that. So, I mean, I don't think there's anything whatsoever wrong with what Hurley said.
Yeah, and I mean, really, when it comes to Caravan, I mean, you can give him criticism for this performance, obviously, but there's nothing overall you can criticize with that guy. He's a champion. He's been a staple of that program for a while. But what I will say about those two free throws missed is that is a prime example of ball don't lie, because let's just be real here, people. That foul call was atrocious. That was a clean block that
Yeah, that was
he did not
definitely.
he did not make any contact with the body there. That was a clean block, and I think Villanova earned this win, because if they would have lost on that call, a lot of people would have been upset, myself included.
Yeah.
Because I just this has been a trend in college basketball lately. The referees, they're trying to have their 15 seconds of fame. They want to find a way to make these things about them. And Blake, this is something that I've talked about with other people that outside of the podcast. But I really do think that when these officials make controversial calls or have bad games, they need to be responsible to go out there in the press conference like these coaches do when they lose and don't perform well in their job, and they need to answer for what went wrong out there, because I mean, college basketball officiating, it's been under fire for a while now, and honestly, I'm starting to get really fed up with it, because it's a big part of why people kind of check out of college basketball. They think that it's a ref show at times as compared to the NBA, where a lot of stuff gets let go. I mean, I don't know if I'm just being, crazy fired up about refereeing here, or if you see kind of what I'm thinking, but That's just my 2 cents on all this.
Great minds think alike. I think the exact same thing. I mean, they're professionals at what they do. Obviously, officiating, umpiring, and baseball, uh, just any referee work is an extremely hard job. But I mean, if you're signing up to do this and you're getting paid money to do it, then you need to be doing your job right and not just making it all about you. The game is about the players. The game is about just the fans, things like that, not about the referees. People don't buy tickets to go in there and watch someone team up. Like,
Hmm.
nobody does that. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's
Like,
put
nobody comes into the arena to watch that.
Yeah, put the fries in the bag, put the whistles in the pockets, zebras. Let's put the whistles up. I mean, I sat through on Tuesday and I watched what felt like a damn 3-hour Kentucky Georgia game because every call was going to the monitor. There were 9 monitor reviews in that game, Blake. That is absurd.
Yeah, that was uncalled for.
I don't mean to
We
get
already
off on
talked
it.
about it, though.
Yeah, I don't mean to get off on a tangent about refereeing here, but if UConn would have won that game off this call, that would have been brutal, and somebody
Yeah.
needed to answer for that. But I want to focus more on Villanova before we move on. Wooga Poplar, we didn't mention him really. We talked about Eric Dixon, but Wooga, man, he had 18, 6 for 10 from the field and 3 for 6 from three. Got to be inspired by that performance, and other guys stepped up as well in that big time spot. You had Jordan Longino. He had a quality outing. The only thing that really concerns me if you're Kyle Neptune moving forward is I just think this team lacks a lot of depth. I mean, their bench guys, I'm looking at their splits right now, not really much to be desired. You had Josiah Mosley with 0 on the night. Other guys in that spot as well. Tyler Perkins, he only had 2. And then another guy there with only 4 in Chris Parker. So that's a concern if you're Kyle Neptune, and really you kind of got to deal with what you have at this point. But do we think that this team, I mean, there's a lot of work to be done still. They've got a decent resume as of today, but do we think they can sneak into the tournament, Blake?
Uh, Respectfully, probably not as of today. I'm sure they could later down the road if their resume ends up getting a little better. But I mean, we're going to have to see a lot more than just a Uconn win and just a Butler win, which, I mean, Butler not very good. And they did beat Cincinnati by 8. So, I mean, that is a good win. But I do think they need to steal one of the Marquette games, either at Marquette or the one at home against Marquette. One of those games would be big. This Georgetown game coming up in a couple weeks is going to be a big one as well. And then, heck, even the one on, I think it's Saturday at St. John's, that's going to be a big game. If they can extend their winning streak to 4 after that St. John's game, maybe I'll feel a little better about this team. I'm still not completely bought into them because, I mean, at the end of the day, it's not the same Jay Wright-led Villanova squad.
Yeah, I think all this really does for them right now is it opens the window to a tournament bid, and it's going to cool off Kyle Neptune's hot seat. But when it comes to Selection Sunday, and if this team ultimately is left out of the tournament, there's 2 games, really 3 almost, that I think you can look back on that's going to keep them out. It's the fact that they lost to Columbia, they lost to St. Joseph's, and then they dropped one to a bad Virginia team. And if that's ultimately what ends up being their fate come March and keeps them out of the tournament, they really only have themselves to blame for those
Yeah.
underwhelming performances. It's going to take a lot of work in the Big East to get it done. I'll just leave it at that for now. But speaking of teams that have a resume they need to improve on and do it quick, the Arkansas Razorbacks, they currently sit at 0-2 in SEC play as they lost last night against Ole Miss 73-66. Chris Beard's squad gets it done there. Malik Dia, huge game for him. He had the dagger 3 towards the end that kind of put the game away for good for the Rebels. Sean Padula, another quality outing on the night with 16. Dre Davis with 10. Blake, this Ole Miss squad I've mentioned it before, they're definitely going to be a team to watch in the SEC, maybe a sleeper team, one that we don't talk about with the cream of the crop group of the SEC as of now, but they've got the quality and they've got the depth where they can make some noise, in my opinion.
Yeah, Hottie Toddy definitely has the depth to make some noise in the SEC tournament and the March Madness this year. I mean, Malik Diaz, getting him out of the portal was a huge add. Sean Padula, he continues to be a really good piece for Ole Miss. Jamin Brakefield, feels like we've heard his name in college basketball for a hot minute, but I mean, he's still a quality player for that team, one of the hardest workers on that squad, and honestly, one of the hardest workers in the entire conference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and then switching over to the Arkansas side of things here, really, where this game is something that really sticks out to me that you can kind of chip this loss up to is the fact that your backcourt of Boogie Flan and DJ Wagner shot a combined 9 of 33 on the night. Boogie Flan
Yeah.
5 for 20, DJ Wagner 4 for 13. You basically had no shows from Carter Knox, Jonas Adu, and then guys off the bench. Trevon Brazile, he just really didn't look like he belonged out there. He got a lot of minutes, but he had some action on the boards, but other than that, not really doing too well. John L. Davis, though, we have wanted to see more out of him. He had 15 off the bench, and Adu Thiero, he continues to be a stabilizing force for them. But Blake, it might be time to sound the alarms with this Arkansas team because John Calipari is now 0-2 in the SEC for the first time in his tenure as a coach in the conference. DJ Wagner, he's not making the jump that I've expected him to. I talked about him in the preseason thinking he'd be a breakout. Hasn't really shown it yet. I mean, there's been flashes of what he can be. He's had moments of excellence, and then he follows it up with games like this where he can't throw a ball in the ocean. And then Boogie Flan, he's electric as a freshman, but he's inconsistent at moments and can kind of be a volume shooter that doesn't really, come out efficient in the end. But how high is the concern level in Fayetteville right now? Because I know their fans have been kind of, on social media having a little bit of a meltdown, thinking it might be time to start panicking. And I mean, they've got Florida coming into town this weekend, and that's a buzzsaw in itself. So there's not a whole lot of time to sit and mope around about this result because, I mean, the SEC, you can't ever take a night off. They got to figure out something quick.
If I had a panic button and my hand was right above it, it'd literally be like this. That's how close I'd be to panicking. I mean, 0-2 in the SEC, I mean, this year at least, not super bad. But, I mean, you're being led by John Calipari. You have some high-level talent. You got guys like John L. Davis, who you probably paid over $1 million for. I mean, he did have a really good performance against Ole Miss last night, like 3 of 7 from the field, something like that. I could be wrong. Let me check real quick so I'm not saying. 4 of 9 from the field, 3 of 7 from 3. He had 15 points on the night. So that was a really good sign for the Razorbacks. But besides that, Boogie Flan, 5 of 20 from the field. That can't happen. I don't think you should be shooting that much. If it's not your night, then you need to be passing the rock. And then besides John L. Davis and Adu Thiero last night, that team, it's really scary to see almost. Big Z, he was questionable coming into the game, only played 4 minutes, but he's still not really showing much promise so far. DJ Wagner, who Luke thought was going to break out this season, I mean, he just really hasn't shown much, and that's just tough to see because I mean he's got the tools to be good, but he's not showing how good he is. He's just struggling from the field, not really creating much offense for the team. Boogie Flan, shot chucking, not doing well. Carter Knox, a ghost in that lineup against Ole Miss. It just can't happen.
Yeah, Billy Richmond with a goose egg as well there. Another freshman that you hope to at least get a little bit out of. Didn't have super high expectations, but I think the reason, I mean, you said that you're like really close to the panic button. The reason I'm on the panic button right now for this Arkansas team, not even really the 0-2 start in conference play. It's just what we saw in the non-conference as well. I mean, they didn't do a whole lot to impress in the non-conference. I mean, they got the win against Michigan, But even then, they were up big in that game. They let go of the rope completely, and they very well could have lost that game. They
Yeah.
struggled against a terrible Miami team whose coach went on to resign like 2 weeks after the game. They got outclassed by Illinois. They lost a close one to Baylor. And I mean, those were your in your resume opportunities in the non-conference there. You went pretty much, 1-2 there because I mean, I wouldn't call Miami a resume spot at all. I mean, the Miami of the past, yeah, but not this one. So they got obviously the win against Michigan, and then they dropped the two against what has been a mediocre Baylor team and an Illinois team that looks elite. I mean, I'm starting to think Final Four aspirations may not be out of the picture for Illinois. That's another discussion, though. And I mean, even against the mid majors, they didn't look really great either. I mean, they only beat UTSA by 15. They beat Little Rock by 12. Other games that were kind of close, Lipscomb, they had struggles with them, eventually pulled away. I mean, it's concerning to say the least, Blake. And I mean, this just isn't going to get better for them because the SEC, it's a war. I mean, they have Florida on Saturday, and then they got to go to LSU. And I mean, LSU by no means is like a earth-shattering team in this league, but they're still a good basketball team. And I mean, every team in the SEC really, besides maybe one or two, you could say is going to be a tough out every night. And I don't know. I mean, do you think that, I mean, when we think about the SEC as a whole, and we think who's at the top and who's kind of in the middle, like, do you see them kind of catching anybody that they could spring an upset or two on, at least as with the sample size that we see right now? Because I just don't really see the vision for it, to be truthful.
Uh, as I sit here tonight, probably not. Maybe Oklahoma, they could get that one. But besides that, I just don't really see him making a ton of noise. John Calipari, I mean, he's looking like a guy who's lost his fastball, basically. Like, he's just not the same coach he once was. He's just more so a recruiter now. And his X's and O's since he lost Robick or whatever his name is from Kentucky hasn't been the same as a whole as a team. Like when he was at Kentucky and now at Arkansas, it just hasn't been the same. He should have never brought that same staff, respectfully, that he had at Kentucky. I don't think that staff is the greatest people to have surrounded by him for offensive and defensive schemes. And I just don't think that roster construction is up to par. I mean, it's tough to see because Cal's one of my favorite college basketball and actually coaches of all time in any sport. So it's just tough to see that. And I mean, Bud Walton Arena is looking like a funeral almost. I mean, they got like old school country music playing. I saw a video of, and
I saw that
literally
too.
the entire arena is silent. No, nothing's being said. Nothing. Like when you're playing in the SEC and the arena is dead silent. Like I personally have never heard an arena that's silent. That just can't happen, honestly, especially when you're playing the top 25 arena. I mean, I saw something that like kind of hinted towards like bad operations by the Arkansas people, like just bad music choice, yada yada yada. But I mean, you got to make the experience a little better for the fans, and it doesn't help when the team is playing under expectations.
Yeah, and I mean, the Bud Walton that we know, it's a lot better than what it was last night. I mean, last night it looked
Yeah,
like a funeral home, and you got a top
yeah,
25 team coming in. And I mean, I get it, students, they're coming back from break next week, and they're not there at the moment. There's winter storms coming through that area. Obviously, everybody stay safe out there, but it's still, I mean, you got to have a better turnout if you're an Arkansas fan. And you mentioned Calipari, like, I hate to see it happen too, but I mean, am I surprised that it's happening? No. I mean,
no,
everybody knows, like, I'm wearing it right now. I'm a Kentucky fan. Like, I don't want to be that guy that gets on here and just crushes Cal and dunks on Cal because that's the cool thing to do these days. It's really not even like a bit anymore. It's just the truth. Like, the guy has lost his fastball. It's blatantly clear. I mean, this team right now, they look incohesive. They look lost. You mentioned that he has assistant coaches that really shouldn't be there. I definitely agree with that. And I think that's probably a big part of the reason why his time in Lexington ended the way that it did. Like, he just has the wrong people around him. And I mean, if I'm Cal, there's talent on this team to figure this out, but he's going to have to adapt and adjust in ways that he doesn't like to do. Because, I mean, we know Cal, we know he has an ego to him, and he likes to do things his way, but it's really just not clicking for him anymore. And I hate it for him. I really wish that when he parted ways with UK last spring, he would have just called it quits and, went in the shadows for a little bit. But obviously, he still has that fire to coach, and he took an opportunity, so he had to do what was best for him. But I don't know. I mean, even Arkansas fans are starting to question, like, was this the right move? I saw a media personality there. I think his name's Josh Neighbors. He said something like, "Are we going to have to admit that the Kentucky fans were right about Cal?" And I mean, it's starting to look like that. And I hate to, like wave the victory flag here because I'm a Kentucky fan. That's not what I'm trying to do. It's really just the simple fact of the matter right now.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess that concludes all we have to say about Arkansas. There's a lot of work to do there. We obviously mentioned a lot of the Arkansas flaws, but at the same time, Ole Miss, quality team, they deserve to win. They're going to cause problems for a lot of teams, and they could definitely find their way into that top group in the SEC that we discussed. But teams that are already in the top group of the SEC, Texas A&M, the number 10 team in the country, they stormed back from 18 down thanks to an absolute legacy game from Zurich Phelps, dropping two people with a three-point dagger at Norman against the number 17 Oklahoma Sooners. Blake, I watched this game before I called it a night last night, and man, that was a hell of a nightcap. And I know all the Aggies fans were tuned into the Full Court Trap socials. We appreciate you all. That was a hell of a win for you guys. And Zurich Phelps, man, he's been legit for A&M so far. And to do this in a spot where Wade Taylor's out and you're on the road as well, that's even more of a testament to this squad and what they're doing. And I'll just put my hand up right now and say it. In the preseason, I said they were overrated and I didn't believe. I was wrong. I'm bought in on this squad now. I think this has a chance to be one of Buzz Williams' best teams of his tenure at Texas A&M.
Yeah, I mean, you said it best. To go on the road without Wade Taylor at a top 25 team and win, excuse me, it's just unreal to think about. Zurich Phelps, unbelievable performance, and to hit that cold-blooded shot near the end of the game with I think it was 5 seconds left to win it. Just unbelievable mentality to be able to take that shot and win it. And then you got guys like Solomon Washington shipping in some production, Pharrell Payne off the bench, Hayden Hefner, he had a good game as well. So, I mean, this team is legit, as you said. And then on the Oklahoma side, can we talk about Bryson Goodine
I was
having
just about to
34
mention
off the
him.
bench, 10 of 14 from the field with 9 of 11 from three? Who would have thought that was going to happen? That's awesome to see, honestly, for that Oklahoma team. And I really think that's just a testament to Moser for their head coach. This team is really deep. I don't think this win is anything to put your head down about. I think this team's still really, really good. Jeremiah Fears, still really, really good. And then you got Jalen Moore as well, who's done nothing but produce at a high level all season. So, I mean, nothing to put your head down about. Sooners fans, I think the Aggies are just a special team right now, and they're clicking at the perfect time.
The only thing I will say that concerns me about this Oklahoma team, obviously, you have the back-to-back losses now to start off conference play. And, I mean, that's going to happen in the SEC. You're going to drop games. You're going to go on spells where it seems like things aren't going right. But the only thing that concerns me is something we mentioned in the resolution podcast. I said Porter Moser was one of my early favorites going into the new year for Coach of the Year. And what I said would have to happen was, the non-conference, it was relatively, for the most part, I don't want to say weak, but it was kind of mediocre. I mean, they had the win against Arizona, who's looking better. I will grant them that. Louisville, a much improved Louisville team, obviously. But then beyond that, really the only win that they can kind of flexes that one against Oklahoma where Jeremiah Fears had that and 1-3 to clinch it. So
Yeah.
the thing that I'm concerned about really is just, these are two back-to-back L's. They lost in blowout fashion to Alabama, and in this one they let go of the rope just completely. Like they were in control of that game, up 18. And in this conference, with teams just going at each other's heads every night, when you get a team like A&M in that spot where they're down and you have them beat, you got to jump on them and just put your foot on the gas and take it away, because this is a result that if they want to get to like the top tier of the SEC, they needed to have this, and they just kind of let it go, to be frank.
Yeah.
And that's just somewhat of a concern there. I mean, they're going to have a chance to improve, obviously. They've got a Georgia team that just took out Kentucky. They got to go to them on Saturday. That's an intriguing spot there. Then on Wednesday next week, they got the Red River rivalry with Texas. So you got two resume opportunities coming up against teams that are quality, not the best of the best in the conference, but they're going to have a chance to get themselves right. And I could easily see them getting their record to a 500, 2-2 in the SEC. But, I mean, kudos to the Aggies, man. I think that this team is legit. Blake, I don't know about you, but I mentioned that I was just worried about, past results where they haven't been able to break through and get to the second weekend. I'm starting to think that if everything clicks the right way and they keep playing the way they are, the second weekend's a lock, and they have the potential for maybe even a Final Four.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, they got the pieces to do it, and if they can get some contribution from like a Bryson Gadeen with he doesn't have to have a crazy performance like that every night, but if he's giving you, let's say, 9+ points every night off the bench, and I mean that team gets even more scary than what their top five or starting five already is.
Yeah, I think you meant Zurich Phelps there. You said Bryson Gadeen for
Wait,
Texas
oh, you're
A&M.
talking about A&M? I thought you
Yeah,
were
I was
talking about
saying
Oklahoma.
no. I was saying
Oh
A&M is the
shoot, my
second
bad.
weekend in Final Four. You're good.
I zoned
hey,
out.
hey,
I was
those
reading something and
those were two great performances, Zurich Phelps and Bryson Gadeen. But yeah, I mean, Zurich Phelps, obviously, if he keeps playing like that, Texas A&M second weekend Final Four, it's definitely in the cards there,
yeah,
100%.
A&M is stacked top to bottom. I mean, their toughness as a team is unreal. They just out physical most teams they play against. And also, they came out and shot like 56%, 55%, something like that in the second half against Oklahoma. So, I mean, if they're doing that plus their defense toughness that they already have, that's a scary sight to see for that A&M team and the teams they play.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I just think really the most part of this that I'm impressed with is Wade Taylor not being in the lineup and you still get the job done. I mean, Wade Taylor, I mean, for all his flaws when it comes to inefficiency, the dude's still a dynamic scorer. He's the playmaker, and he's the straw that stirs the drink there for Buzz Williams and the Yale leaders in College Station. So kudos to them. This was a big win, comeback spot. They earned it. I mean, Oklahoma, you got to execute better down the stretch, and just you're gonna have your get right spots here in the next couple games. So hopefully this will get them back on track. But moving on, we got another team that's looking scary good at the moment right now, and also was without their best player. Illinois, they absolutely blitzed Penn State, almost winning that game by 40, 52-91, and they did that all without Kasparis, Blake. So, man, I mean, if you're Brad Underwood and the Illinois faithful, you got to be encouraged with that.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I'm just not super bought into that Penn State team. I mean, Illinois, they're just improving night in and night out. And Humrich, I can't even say his name, dude. Ben Humerichius. There we go. 21 points on 8 of 15 and 5 of 9 from 3 on the night. Then he also had 9 boards, a steal, and a block. So, I mean, he led the way. And then Trey White, he's another guy that's been improving, I feel like, this season, too. I mean, he's always been a decent player in college. He's rated like a top 75 guy coming out of high school. He's a junior this year, but he's putting up a lot more numbers each night, I feel like. And he had 20 points on 7 of 12 from the field, 7 boards, 2 assists, and 1 steal. It's a really good night for those guys. And then Marez Johnson Jr., who would have thought 20 bomb? Like, he's a guy that really hasn't scored a ton this season. I mean, he had 11 points against Chicago State last month on the 29th, but and then I guess against Maryland Eastern Shore, he had 10 points. But besides that, he hadn't hit double digits at all. Just those like 3 games. Then he comes out against a Big Ten opponent and puts up 20 and 11 coming off the bench in just like 20 minutes of game time. My bad. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's unreal.
Yeah, I mean, Illinois, obviously, they're a better team than Penn State here, but to do that without your best player, I think that's always something to hang your hat on. And good
Yeah.
win there for Underwood's squad. A couple of brief mentions before we get into what's happening this weekend. Iowa State, they dominated Utah from start to finish. Otzelberger and the Cyclones continue to keep things rolling there. Mississippi State, Blake, our man Josh Hubbard, they're having a hell of a season right now. 14-1. They've got the huge matchup with Kentucky coming this weekend that we're going to talk about. That team looks legit right now.
Yeah, they're scary. I mean, we said it a little bit about A&M. Same thing can be said about Mississippi State. They're a super hard-nosed team, and they can kill you from the field. I mean, Josh Hubbard, we've seen him have nights where he's not like the leading scorer for that team. But then guys like Riley, or not Riley.
Riley
Riley
Kugel.
Kugel.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Riley Kugel.
I keep zoning out. Claudel Harris, Kashawn Murphy, and R.J. Melendez. All 4 of those guys, 4 or 5 of those guys, have been really big contributors this season. Josh Hubbard, as we've talked about a billion times, he's one of the best sophomore guards in the entire country. Really fun guy to watch. Glad we had him on the podcast for an interview before the season really kicked off. But yeah, this team, they're going to make some noise come March, I think. What do you think, Luke?
Oh, 100%. The makings of a March run are all there for Chris Jans and this squad. I mean, you got the scorer and Hubbard. You got the surrounding pieces with Kugel, Melendez, Claudel Harris. I mean, there's nothing not to like about that team right now, barring any major setbacks that we don't see. And I think they have a chance to make a big statement this weekend against Kentucky for sure. And other action before we move on into talking about those weekend games, Marquette, they survived a scare against Georgetown there. Georgetown, they've been a little bit frisky over there in the Big East so far this season, Blake. I'm a little bit surprised by that development.
Yeah, Cooley getting hired by them was such a good move. I feel like he's the guy for that job. He's going to do solid things with that program. They had Malik Mack, who was a Harvard transfer. He's, I think, a sophomore this year. He had 17 points for them, while Chase Ross for Marquette had, like, I think it was 27 points on the night. I mean, absolutely dominating performance by Ross. And then Cam Jones on the Marquette side as well went 4 of 14 from the field. That's kind of not what you want to see from a guy who's been National Player of the Year contender. But, I mean, they still got the job done. And then to flip back on the Georgetown side, Micah Peavy, who played at TCU earlier in his career, had 13 points in the starting lineup. Jordan Burks, your guy from Kentucky, coming off the bench with 8 points on 3 of 5 from the field, 2 of 2 from 3. Curtis Williams Jr., a guy who played at Louisville and as a sophomore this year at 10 points off the bench, 2 made threes. And then Thomas Sorber, he's another guy that's really been under the radar, I feel like, to start off the season. He's one of the better freshmen as well so far in college basketball. I feel like we say that about a ton of people, but I mean, the freshman talent this year is just unreal in like really every conference almost. He had 11 points, 13 boards, 5 blocks, and 1 steal. on 3 of 5 from the field. So insanely good night for him. And I do think Georgetown is a team we should pay a little more attention to moving forward in the Big East.
Oh yeah, for sure. No. And I think if you're a Marquette fan, you got to be encouraged with the fact that, Cam Jones, he has an off night and Chase Ross steps up and goes nuclear. It's good to see that you have a guy who can step up and deliver when your main guy is not really having it on a given night. But in other news, back to the SEC, Bama, they blow out South Carolina on the road. Somewhat expected, I would say. And then they have the blowout win against Oklahoma last weekend. Blake, the Tide, they're coming out hot to start off conference play. This team, they're starting to get themselves right after we were a little bit concerned about them heading into league play.
Yeah, that team is unbelievable still. South Carolina, we did think they were going to be one of the weaker teams in the SEC, but to go on the road and blow them out by 20 points, and then also to blow out Oklahoma, who we talked about a little bit about them being a really good team still, to blow them out by like 25 plus points at Alabama. It's unbelievable to really think about. Mark Sears, he kind of started off a little shaky, I felt like, to start off the season, but he's really picked up his production again. LeBaron Philon, he's another one of those freshman guys that I've been really impressed with. Bediako, he's another guy that's really picking up production as well. Grant Nelson, still a really solid piece for them. Jaron Stevenson, he's a guy who I'm not really impressed with. I don't think he should be getting a ton of minutes anymore. Aiden Holloway having a really good season still. Latrell Wrightsell, he's having a really good season in just 8 games played. He had a injury and ended up coming back. Chris Youngblood, he's only played 6. A big piece. Eventually, Houston Millette, I mean, he's not played a ton of games either. He kind of filled in when they were down right cell, but he's having a good season. I mean, that team is just really, really deep, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, they're definitely one of the deeper teams in the SEC. And when they're clicking on all cylinders, they're going to be tough to beat. And then lastly, for the week action, we had Kansas. They took care of business against Arizona State. They've got back-to-back blowout wins in their pocket now after that stumble against West Virginia. Starting to right the ship there a little bit and getting things back under control. Zeke Mayo had a great game with 23 on the night. Hunter Dickinson with a cool 15 and 12 for his standards. Obviously, we like to see Kansas getting right, but they haven't had a strong test yet ever since that West Virginia game. But their next 2 games here, Blake, they're going to get on the road at Cincinnati and on the road at Iowa State. So talk about being tested. They're going to have a stretch to see what they're made of coming up here soon.
Yeah, that's going to be absolute war in the Big 12 for them. I mean, that Iowa State game, I'm definitely going to have eyes on it. A 7 p.m. tip-off on a weekday. I'm excited for that one.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm definitely going to have some eyes on that one. But that's enough of the week that was, Blake. Let's get into what we got coming up here on Friday and Saturday. Not a whole lot to note on Friday.
Exactly what we need.
Yeah, not a whole lot to note on Friday. UCLA does take on a frisky Maryland team on the road. Do we think that UCLA drops another one here, or does Mick Cronin's talk about his team being delusional get him fired up and ready to go?
I think Maryland pulls this one off. I mean, I still think UCLA is still a good team, but I think Maryland can pull this one off, especially with it being played at Maryland.
Yeah, 100%. I think I'm going to put the full court trap curse on Maryland here. I'm going in on Maryland, which probably means UCLA is going to get the job done.
Yeah, because I feel like we're 0 for right now with Maryland predictions. Because we've said, at least I have said Maryland for a couple games, and they just never won. So we'll see if they can flip that narrative.
Yeah, no, we'll see what happens here. I will note, too, some live action we got going on right now. It looks like Oregon just survived a scare against Ohio State just by 1, though, 72-71. A nice escape there for the Ducks. They needed to win that game. But moving on with the preview portion, Blake, we got a loaded Saturday coming up. A lot of great action coming up. This is the time of year we live for right here. Conference play. We're fully into it now. All the major conferences, they've debuted. They're off to about 2 games in now, all across the leagues. And we're going to start with the best team in the country, in our opinion. Auburn. They go on the road to a South Carolina team that just got blitzed by Alabama. I don't think South Carolina strings an upset here. I'd be very surprised if they do, and I think on Monday Auburn's going to be the new number 1 team in the nation.
Yeah, I think this is just going to be Alabama at South Carolina part 2. I think Auburn's going to run through South Carolina in this one and get the easy win.
Yeah, I mean, not much more to say there, really. It's a self-explanatory. South Carolina, one of the lower-tier teams in the SEC, as we mentioned at length. Auburn, the bluest of the blue when it comes to blue bloods in the SEC right now and across college basketball. I know Auburn fans on Twitter have their opinions about being blue blood status. But this could be a year to solidify some of those takes. But moving over to Uconn, who's going to be in a bounce-back spot here, they get a Georgetown team that just tested Marquette. I don't know, Blake. I mean, this could be a scary spot for if you're Dan Hurley on the road against a frisky team there. What do you think? You going to be bold enough to go against Hurley?
No, I think the Huskies get a bounce back win, and I think Hurley lights a fire under that team just like he did after Maui. I think they win. I think it'll be close, though. I think Georgetown's going to bring everything they got for Dan Hurley and the Huskies, but I think the Huskies pull this one off.
Yeah, I learned my lesson. I'm not counting out a Uconn squad after a L. That would just be a premature move after the way they showed us up with the bounce back after Maui. So give me Uconn to handle their business here. This is an intriguing spot for Kansas, though, going on the road to Cincinnati in Big 12 play. Blake, I don't know about you, but I think I'm going with Skyline Chili over in Cincinnati there. Give me the Bearcats in this one. I think they spring an upset.
I am not going to have to, or I'm not going to agree with you on this one. I got the Rock Chalk Nation. I don't have any stock bought in with the Bearcats. They've kind of sold me a couple times this season as well. I'm going to have to go with the Jayhawks here, and I do think they win by, let's say, 8 to maybe 12. I could end up being completely wrong, and Cincinnati ends up winning with a freaking Jizzle James 25-point performance. Dylan Mitchell double-double, but that's the smoke I got to take.
The fuel behind my take here is, we have a Cincinnati squad that's wounded. They've lost 3 in a row, but we're also got a Kansas team here that's shown they have their flaws, and they've been prone to upsets in road spots. They lost to Creighton. They lost to Missouri. I mean, this Kansas team, they've been on the receiving end of an upset or two so far in this college basketball season. And I think Cincinnati needs a win here. They're going to be playing like a team that's desperate for a big-time moment, and I think they get it done. And I could be completely wrong, but in a season that's going to be wild and full of upsets, you got to take your risks where you can get them, and I'm riding with the Bearcats here. But moving on to more Big 12 action where I don't see an upset happening, one of the teams that I'm the most high on in college basketball, Iowa State, they're going into Texas Tech. Obviously, playing in Lubbock, that's always going to be a tough task. That United Supermarkets Arena, it's always a tough venue. Their fans get up, but I like Otzelberger's squad here too much. I like Curtis Jones, Joshua Jefferson, Taman Lipsey, all those guys. You can go down the list. It's just a quality squad top to bottom, and I think they're just going to overwhelm Texas Tech.
Yeah, I do think that Texas Tech doesn't have enough firepower to handle Otzelberger and the Cyclones in this one. And I think the Cyclones win pretty easily as well.
Yeah, not a super flaming hot take there from either of us. Moving over back to the SEC, the Florida Gators, who are riding the high of taking out the number 1 team in the country, the Tennessee Volunteers, they go to Bud Walton and face an Arkansas team that's looking at an 0-2 conference record right now. They haven't looked the greatest. I mean, we just talked at length about the issues of this team. This is a ultimate resume spot here for Cal Blake. I mean, he's got the home court advantage. We'll see if the fans show up for this one. I have a feeling they will, with it being a weekend game against a marquee opponent. You think they get it done and finally get things on the tracks here, or is Florida just too good?
Until I see anything different from DJ Wagner and Big Z and John L. Davis on a more consistent level, then I'm not going to be too high on this Arkansas team. Uh, Florida is looking like a top 5 team, and I think that's pretty easy to recognize right now in the country. I mean, they're just putting up crazy numbers on the offensive end, and they got some toughness behind them with their starting bigs. So I mean, that team, I think they're gonna run through Arkansas, and that's not even really me trying to hate watch on Arkansas. That's just me being blunt. As of what time is it? 8:17 p.m. on January 9th. I haven't seen anything that's really like shot out at me to be super excited about this Arkansas team. I mean, I guess we will see this weekend if they somehow pull it off. I think it's going to take a John L. Davis, maybe a Trevon Brazile, a Duthiero, Boogie Flan breakout games. I don't even know if you'd call it breakout games, just good games in general. Because, I mean, I just don't see them really stopping Walter Clayton, Elijah Martin, and then what's his name, the center? Not
Alex Condon.
not Alex Condon. Chenanu.
Ruben Chinyelu.
Ruben Chinyelu. Yeah, I didn't want to butcher it first attempt. But,
No,
I
you're
mean,
good.
I don't think they have a big to be able to match that intensity that he brings. He's not really skilled in any way, but I mean, he can bully you. I mean, he showed it against Kentucky. Alex Condon is having a great season. I don't think Jonas Ayadu. Actually, I lied. Jonas Ayadu can handle his own against Condon, but I don't see any world where Arkansas pulls this one off. I'm going to be biting my tongue on this because, I mean, obviously I've seen crazier things happen in this world, and it's hard to count out John Calipari still. And, I mean, he has been not the same coach, but it's hard to count John Calipari out at the end of the day.
Yeah, you mentioned Jonas Adu being able to handle his own, but I mean, at the same time, are we really sure he can handle his own? Because I mean, he only had 2 and 5 against Ole Miss, and
I'm
he kind of
talking on
got
the
out.
defensive end, though.
Yeah, I get. Yeah, I mean, defensively, yes, but
Yeah.
he did get outclassed by Malik Dia on Wednesday night. I will say that, but I'm like you, Florida, Walter Clayton, Will Richard, Elijah Martin, as good of a trio as you're going to find. Hard to bet against those dudes. Todd Golden, he's a great coach. I mean, a great young mind. He seems to have that program rolling in the right direction. I just would be very shocked, if the Aduthiero show is able to take down a team that just made the number one team in the country, as of today at least, look silly. It's going to take, Boogie Flan and DJ Wagner, they can't shoot 9 for 33 again, I'll say that. And you got to have more from your bench pieces as well. I mean, Big Z's got to be a little bit more incorporated. I know you mentioned he was questionable going into the previous game. Billy Richmond, Carter Knox, if you can get just not even lighten up the box score. If they can just make winning plays for you and you have your solid core there of the starting rotation, if they can just be serviceable, I think you have a recipe for a win. But there's nothing, I mean, it's like you said, no disrespect, but as we sit right now, there's no reason to buy any stock into this Arkansas team or put any faith in them. And until I see something, I'm not putting my chips in on them. But another SEC matchup of a team that is struggling out of the gates in conference play, but definitely could have a chance to improve and pick up a resume win here. Oklahoma's going on the road to a Georgia team that just proved they can hang with the best of them as they upset my Wildcats on Tuesday. Do we think Georgia and Mike White have another upset up their sleeves here, Blake?
Hard to tell. I mean, if Georgia controls the tempo like they did against Kentucky, and they definitely could. I think Oklahoma bounces back here though, and I feel like that's not crazy to say. But, I mean, then again, you can't count out Mike White and this team. They've shown they're a lot better than people thought coming into the season. Asa Newell, I mean, obviously he was a highly touted player coming out of high school with that Montverde squad that ended up winning the Chipotle Nationals. But, I mean, he's just looking insane. He struggled against Kentucky in that first half, but then came out, ended with might have been like 15 points. And I think he had a couple threes as well and was getting to the free throw line at uh, a really shocking rate. So, I mean, the guy's really good. And it's not even just him doing damage as well for that team. Silas DeMary, who I accidentally called Tyron Lawrence last episode. My bad, Georgia fans. And then there's one other guy that I'm thinking of that I can't.
Blue Cane.
Blue Cane. Yeah, I don't know how I forgot about Blue Cane. Good old Blue Cane. He's really improved as a player. I mean, he's bringing a lot of energy to that team, and he's scoring well. He's playing good defense. I mean, that team definitely is one we should be monitoring moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
You know what? I'm going to ride the hot hand here and this to quote the great Pat McAfee, "What's that coming down the track?" The Mean Machine in the red and black. They're going to get it done here. They get another upset, top 25 upset. Those home fans are going to go crazy. They earned my respect with the way they just completely out-toughed Kentucky and made us look weak. Asa Newell, I like him. He's a great freshman talent, and I think if Blue Cane, Silas Demery, and if you can get a better game from Tyron Lawrence as well, who struggled even when they did beat Kentucky, that's a recipe for an upset brewing there, and I won't be surprised if we see it. So, you know what? Give me the Dogs. Go Dogs, baby. I think they get it done here. Another possible upset debate here to talk about. Tennessee, they're wounded. They just got beat in historic fashion down in the swamp, and now they got to go to a Texas team that just gave Auburn a tough challenge there and almost pulled off the upset. Trey Johnson, Jordan Pope, Arthur Kaluma. You know, there's talent on the roster, like I've said, Blake. I mean, if they're going to get into the tournament and try and piece together a decent resume and work their way up the SEC, I mean, here's an opportunity for you, Texas. You get a great Tennessee team on your home court. However, I don't think they get it done. Tennessee shot atrociously bad against Florida. I find it really hard for them to replicate that performance. I think Chaz Lanier bounces back in a big way. Igor Milicic, Zakai Zeeler, all those guys. I mean, I just think they're going to be too much for Texas, although I do like Texas, and I think they could give people a scare.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Tennessee ends up winning this. I think the biggest story of the night, it's not necessarily player related, but I mean, Rick Barnes is coming back to Texas again. He's been there before, but the arena that they're playing in isn't the same as the one he coached in. Rick Barnes, he won over 400 games as Texas's coach, and he was there for 17 years, was really successful. That's how he got his name in the first place. So, I mean, that's going to be really fun to see him go back again to Texas, a place that he called home at one point. And I look forward to that game for sure.
For sure, and I'll tell you another game that I'm looking forward to. Alabama and Texas A&M, two of the hottest teams in the SEC right now. This is going to be a great watch. In College Station, Alabama's going to have a real test here on their hands. Have we heard anything about the status of Wade Taylor for this game? Because I
I
personally
haven't seen
haven't.
I haven't seen anything. I'm assuming he'll give it a go. Actually, it says 6 hours ago there's some sort of update from On3. I don't know if I'll be able to look at it though, just because
Mm-hmm.
they kind of hide some stuff on there. But it says,
Yeah, paywalls.
let's see.
He was complaining about tightness in his knees, what I'm reading. And then
Yeah,
that led to him being kept out against Oklahoma. So
said
I
it
don't
feels
know.
like jelly. He's sprinting into the locker room after getting it stretched out. So I mean, if he can give it a go, then I think A&M can win that game. I think either way, like it's a hard one to predict, to be honest with you. I'm just gonna have to go with my gut here, though. At the end of the day, this is without adding Wade Taylor to the mix of it. I think Alabama pulls this one off, but I think it's going to be another game that's going to be neck and neck throughout the entire way. A&M, they're probably going to bring out the entire state of Texas for that game. It's probably going to be sold out probably by tonight, to be honest with you.
It's probably already sold out, to tell you the truth.
It might actually be sold out already. But, yeah, I think I'm going to have to go with my gut, Alabama. I think it's going to be a close game. If A&M pulls it off, then that's even better for A&M.
Yeah, I just this is going to be a great matchup. I mean, even if Wade Taylor doesn't play, I think the home court does give Texas A&M a boost. But I just think Alabama's too good. I really like them overall as a unit. I did say in the preseason that they were my national championship pick, and we'll see how that evolves as the season goes on. But the talent's there. I mean, this team's deep, one of the deeper teams in the league. Mark Sears, go out there, have a good night, and I think they'll get it done. But I really hope Wade Taylor does play just from a game perspective, because that will make this a really, really fun watch if he does give it a go.
Yeah, definitely.
And then moving on to my Wildcats, they do not get a break after their Georgia upset. They got to go to Starkville and take on the Mississippi State Bulldogs, who are on a roll, sitting at 14-1 right now. Blake, I will let you go first while I mull this one over. Do you think that Kentucky gets the bounce back here, or is it going to be the Dogs picking up their first win in Starkville against Kentucky in many years now? I know Kentucky's got a bit of a streak going against them.
I don't know, honestly. It's hard to pick one. I mean, last time I saw these two go head-to-head at Starkville, it took a buzzer beater from Reed Shepherd to win. So, I mean, I think this is going to be another classic in the works. I'm going to go with Mississippi State here. I think they finally get over the hump of not being able to beat Kentucky at Starkville. And yeah, I do think this Mississippi State team is different. Kentucky showed that they can struggle with guys that are teams that are tough and control the tempo. I mean, we saw that in the Clemson game. We just saw that in the last game they lost.
Georgia.
Yeah. See, my mind keeps – I'm trying to read something and then my mind just goes to blank. But
You're
yeah,
good, brother.
They definitely show some bit of like a weak mentality almost. Them as a team, like trying to rebound as well, is kind of laughable. I mean, they got guys just looking at the ball going up in the air and just let the other team get it with ease. So, I mean, if Kentucky can't fix that issue, and if they're not going to have Amari Williams and Andrew Carr be big factors, like we just saw at Georgia in a horrible game. I mean, Kobe Bray, I think he was playing sick as well. If those guys are basically Casper the Ghost and not giving anything, then, I mean, it could get ugly to an extent.
Yeah, it definitely could. And I mean, Amari Williams and Andrew Carr, you mentioned it, like you never know what you're going to get from those two. If they're clicking and they're giving their best effort, then it adds another dimension to Kentucky and it provides them with a boost in the front court. I really think a matchup that's going to be of value for Kentucky is Lamont Butler on Hubbard.
Lamont, that's going to be some cinema type of stuff.
He's had some moments, Lamont, of foul trouble and, just kind of being overly aggressive on defense, which, I mean, that's what he is. He's a defensive menace at heart. He's improved majorly on the offensive end this year, and I think if you're Kentucky, you have to keep Lamont in the game to get him on Hubbard, because if Travis Perry tries to go out there and defend him, with all due respect, that's barbecue chicken. And, I mean, Kentucky has to win this game, in my opinion, to counteract the effects of that Georgia loss, because that's an unexpected loss that they didn't want to have on their resume. And if you want to keep competing at the top end of the SEC, this is a game you have to have. However, I just don't see it. I think Starkville's going to be alive for that one, obviously. The crowd's going to
Yeah.
be outrageous. There's a lot of factors going against Kentucky in this one, and I think it could get ugly in Starkville. It might be a little bit of a splattering in Starkville there for my Wildcats.
Yeah.
I'm concerned, to say the least. I hope I'm wrong, obviously, but I don't really see the vision for a Kentucky win here, to be quite frank.
You tell the people that you might be making the trip if God allows you and the weather isn't terrible.
I could be in Starkville this weekend. Yes, we're not 100% sure on that. Winter storms have been absolutely just destroying me as of lately. We just had one last weekend, and now here comes another one rolling in tomorrow morning and into the afternoon. But if I can get there safely, I will be in Starkville. A game time decision as of now. I'm kind of like Wade Taylor. You don't know if I'm
Game
going to
time
show up or
decision.
not. Game time decision for Luke's status in Starkville, but I hope I can pop out there because I really want to see a new environment. And I know A&M, or not A&M, excuse me. I was thinking about Wade Taylor there. Mississippi State, they're going to be fired up, and I'd like to see that environment because I think I don't think it's going to be a good game, honestly. I think Kentucky might just get outclassed, but if it is a good game, I want to be there. But transitioning off of this one and over to the Gonzaga Bulldogs, a team it feels like we haven't discussed in a little bit now. They have Washington State this weekend, a 13-3 Washington State team, I will add. A quality opponent there for the Zags. Do we think that Gonzaga survives here? I mean, it's at the Kennel, so that's obviously always going to be a big help. But I could see Washington State being competitive in this game, but ultimately falling because, I mean, this Washington State team, they're really not super tested as of yet this year. And, I mean, this is what bigger test than the Kennel over there in Spokane.
Yeah, I think Gonzaga handles this one. The Kennel is just different. And, I mean, Gonzaga, they've shown their struggles at times. But, I mean, this this Washington State team has shown that they really haven't had a ton of resume wins, I would say. I mean, they got boat raced by SMU. They got outclassed by Washington, lost by 16. They lost to Iowa by 10, who's really not a good team this year in the Big Ten. So I think Gonzaga handles their business. I do think Nate Calmese, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but I do think he's a really good player for them. They got him out of the portal. Isaiah Watts is another guy that's had a really good season. I think Cedric Coward, I forget if he's out right now or if let me see. Yeah, he's out right now. He's been out since November, but he started off the season hot, averaging almost 18 a game. So that's a big loss to that team. I don't remember how long he's out for, but I mean, they do have a good little team there. I just don't think it's enough to beat Gonzaga. But I mean, we do see every year Gonzaga dropping some really random games in the WCC.
Yeah, I think it could be, I think it'll be a game that's close in the first half, and Gonzaga's talent just makes them pull away. But we'll get into a few quick hitters before we round out the podcast. Oregon versus Penn State. I imagine Oregon's the consensus pick here.
Yeah, Oregon. Easy,
Yeah,
I feel like.
we got the Revival. They head into Pittsburgh, and they take on a wounded Pittsburgh team that just got blasted at Duke. Do we think Pat Kelsey snags another one here?
Yeah, probably so. I mean, the team's starting to kick it into a different gear. I mean, they're really, what's the word I'm looking for? They're really improving as a team. I mean, their best player kind of struggled the other night, Chucky Hepburn, from the field, but then they had Javon Hadley pick up that slack and have a career high at 32 points and then had 10 rebounds. And then another guy that I thought was a little under talked about coming into the season, and that being James Scott. He's their center right now, and he just had a double-double against who'd they play last game? We
Louisville.
posted it. Go Clemson. It was Clemson,
Yeah,
and they
Clemson.
won by 10. And that's a really big win. I mean, Clemson, they've shown they're not a pushover team this year. They got some key wins. So, yeah, I mean, Louisville, they're starting to pick it up. And, I mean, there is a chance they could potentially sneak into the NCAA tournament, I think.
Oh, yeah.
ACC obviously is really weak. But, I mean, you never know. I mean, they're starting to get some good wins.
Yeah, no, the NCAA tournament I definitely don't think is out of the question yet for them. They obviously need to do some work, but I think they
Yeah.
get started here and get a win. But an under the radar matchup that actually has caught my eye. We got a quality San Diego State team playing one of my favorite mid majors, the New Mexico Lobos. Donovan Dent, he is a stud mid major guy that
Yeah.
if they make it into the big dance, you're going to be hearing his name called. And you know what? I'll take them over the Aztecs on Saturday. Give me New Mexico. Blake, you going to join me on that movement?
Yeah, I think New Mexico does pull it off.
Yeah, I think, I mean, Richard Pitino, he's a quality coach. He had his stints at where was he? He coached at Minnesota at one point, correct?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, didn't work out for him, but he's found a spot there in New Mexico, and I like what he's got going on. They made the tournament last year. I think they have a good chance of going back this year as well. East
Yeah,
Carolina and Memphis. Memphis, I assume, handles their business, although this has been a weird Memphis team. We know they have that loss
yeah,
against Arkansas State looming on the resume.
yeah.
But Memphis, yeah, take care of business there. BYU versus TCU on the road. I think
BYU, but
BYU, yeah,
yeah,
I think BYU handles their business there. Florida State versus Clemson. That's an intriguing matchup as well. This is at Little John. I have bad memories of Little John this season, so anytime I hear that arena get brought up, give me the Tigers.
yeah. Clemson in that one. Boise State, Utah State would be another good game on Saturday. Prime time TV,
I,
baby.
I like Utah State. I haven't caught much of
Yeah,
them this year, but I did see that Tucker Anderson buzzer beater against San Diego State earlier in the year. So give me the Utah State Aggies there.
yeah.
I'm riding with them. But other than that, I'm not seeing a ton that catches my eye here. Syracuse and Boston College, the real winner of that game is the people that don't tune in.
Kansas
Them,
State, Houston might not be a bad game. Granted, uh, Kansas State sitting at 7-7 after spending. I think it was projected to be like $5 million on NIL. I mean, they blew it on like Coleman Hawkins. I remember as one guy that got a ton of NIL money. He was really highly touted too in the portal, and he's just not really produced to the level they wanted. But I mean, it's still a good team or a team that has potential and talent on there. Ugano Onyenzo, I don't think he's really done much this season for them, but I mean, there's a world, I guess, where he could potentially maybe. I don't even know if I want to say it. Maybe has a good performance against Houston. Nagason is another guy for Kansas State. He's averaging 13 points a game. Brandon Housen, Doug McDaniel's kind of been shaky this season, and he was a guy who I thought was a really good leader for that Michigan team a little back. But
yeah, I'm not gonna overthink this one. Give me Houston.
yeah, I think Houston ends up winning probably
This
by 15. But I mean,
yeah,
this is a Houston team that I feel like every year kind of isn't super high scoring. But I mean, maybe this is a game where they do come out and have a statement of sorts.
I won't be surprised if this game is like 25 to 18 at halftime because I mean Houston
Yeah,
just had a really low scoring game recently against Oklahoma State going into half, but underrated matchup in the SEC that we can hit on briefly. Vanderbilt sitting at 13-2. They go to a 12-3 Missouri squad. Vanderbilt, if you want to work your way up into the ladder of the SEC, here's a chance to do it. This Missouri team, they've got a win against Kansas under their belt this year so far. I think they take care of their business here, but that's no guarantee because, I mean, any given night in the SEC this year, you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I do think that one is a big time toss up, though, to be honest with you. I do think Missouri pulls it off, though. But I mean, this might be a game we look back on and are like, oh shit, we got proven wrong. Because I mean, that Vandy
Hmm.
team, they're still probably one of the worst teams in the SEC. But I mean, look at their record; they're not a pushover in any sort of way. I feel like this year.
No, not at all. There's really no team in the SEC that's a pushover, in my opinion. But circling to the ACC, North Carolina, they take on North Carolina State. I'll go ahead and say it, must-win game for the Tar Heels. They're sitting at 10-6. They got their rival in NC State sitting at 9-6. Games at NC State. You know what? Give me the Wolfpack. I think they pull it off here.
I got North Carolina. Honestly, though, I feel like every game moving forward for them is going to be a must win. I mean, they've lost some games they shouldn't have. They've been in some games they shouldn't have been like really close with. I mean, they should have never been close to Notre Dame, to be honest with you. Obviously, that environment, I've been there once for a game, and the environment there is unreal. It's a really small arena, and their quote unquote upper level is like literally like the lower level of any other arena I've been in, like any other NBA arena. So I mean that place is really loud, but they
Hmm.
should have never been close. I feel like in that game, you're a blue blood. You got Ian Jackson and R.J. Davis, and just those guys alone, like that really should set you apart from that Notre Dame team.
For sure. Here's an intriguing matchup I spotted in the Big Ten. Indiana going on the road to an 11-4 Iowa squad. Now, Indiana, they have quietly pieced together multiple wins in a row here. I think it's a 5-game win streak or a 4-game win streak ever since they fell against Nebraska. They also don't have Malik Rayno at the moment, as far as I know. I think that he was out in their last game, and he's still projected to be out. They've had controversy, Amar Ballo, he was spotted out on the town, maybe having himself too good of a night and then facing the consequences in the next game. But Blake, we buried this Indiana team a couple months ago, and I still don't buy into them long term. But I mean, they have put together some wins now, and they're trying to get this thing rolling. So you got to give them credit there. Do you think they get a win in Iowa?
Yeah, I do think they win it. Yes, I do have a 5 game win streak right now, but I
Mm-hmm.
mean, besides Rutgers, I don't even know if I'd count Rutgers as a good team though. Out of those, they're sitting at 1-4 in the conference so far this year, and they're 8-8 on the season. I mean, obviously, Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper, two of the best freshmen in all of college basketball, but I mean that team as a whole sucks to put it point blank. But
Mm-hmm.
the 5 teams that IU's played really is not good. Chattanooga, Winthrop, Rutgers, at Penn State, and Penn State not very good. USC, the Must Bus. I mean, it's not super exciting over there. So I do think IU wins probably by 7
Yeah, I'll
at
take
Iowa.
IU as well. I'm rolling with the Hoosiers there. Last two in the Big 12 before we close out the night. Unranked Baylor team, 10-4, going against an Arizona State team. This is at Arizona State, also sitting at 10-4. Weird to see a Scott Drew led Baylor team sitting at this underwhelming mark on the year so far, Blake. But I mean, they got a good chance here to pick up a quality win, and I'm honestly not so sure that they're going to get it done. Arizona State's not a bad team. They got to come ready to play. VJ Edgecombe, he's got to show out. You got to get a good performance from that team all around. Norchad O'Meara, Robert Wright, all those guys. But I'll go with Arizona State here. Give me the Sun Devils.
Uh, I'm gonna have to go against you here. I apologize, but Baylor, I think they handled the business there. Because I don't even know if Joe Sanan is going to be able to be available. He was out last game because of a lower half injury. I don't know what injury it is, but I mean, I don't even know what his availability looks like moving to this weekend. So give me the Bears, probably pretty handily.
Fair. I like the Sun Devils, and we'll close out the podcast with the team we started it with, Arizona. They host UCF. Do we think they keep the revival of the season going here if you're Tommy Lloyd?
Yeah.
I agree. I think Arizona takes care of their business here, and they start to get this thing, continue, really. They're building together some quality performances and got to keep it rolling here. But, yeah, Blake, we covered a lot in this episode, but before we head out, we got a big weekend ahead. When we come back here on Monday to record, what do we think the biggest story of the weekend is going to be with all that we've previewed?
It's going to have to be probably a pair of wins that most people aren't expecting. There's going to be a couple big upsets, I feel like, especially with the part of the season we're in, conference play early in January. I mean, it's definitely a recipe for upsets.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this is upset season, to say the least. There's definitely a chance we're going to see some headlines that we're not expecting. I fully expect to have some results here to unpack on Monday. If I had to single out one, I think that the story of the weekend is going to be Mississippi State fully putting themselves on the national radar and taking care of business against Kentucky. I have my concerns about my boys in blue, so we'll see what happens. But I think the Bulldogs make a big statement this weekend and firmly insert themselves into the national conversation and get a lot more respect on their name, because I think people are still sleeping on this team overall. And I mean, Chris Jans, he's building a squad there and he's building a program, and I think that they're going to have a statement this weekend in Starkville, and the people of Starkville will celebrate, and I will be out there in sadness if I can make my way through the pounds of snow that's getting dumped on my state at the moment. But Blake, we're out of here. Jake Roll, Jack Sullivan, come back, guys. We miss you. Hopefully you all will be on board on Monday. I also heard rumblings. Now, this is just sources. My sources are telling me Dylan Durbin might be back on Monday after his long holiday break. We'll see what happens there. I don't know if your sources can confirm that or not, Blake. You got the big
Hold on. Let me get on the phone real quick.
Okay. Shit. You get on the phone.
Is this Dylan Durbin? Yeah. He's back. He's back ready with the boys. We're back.
We got the whole crew back. We're ready to storm into the meat and potatoes of this college basketball season. Full strength, full numbers. But yeah, Blake, we're out of here. We'll talk to everybody later. Enjoy the weekend, you all.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you guys.